Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. This is Arise the Honest Man's podcast. I am Karuna Avatar Das, and with me is my dear beloved co-host Jai Jagannath Prabhu. This is episode 44. We haven't actually been on since the 14th of September. We've just had some awkwardness with scheduling guests and just kind of life getting in the way, but we're back at it. We're very determined to do 52 episodes before the end of the year. We started this endeavor beginning of November last year, and it's been an incredible journey. We've been receiving amazing feedback. People are very positively impacted, and so that really gives us the inspiration to keep pushing on. So this is Conscious Relationships episode 8. We have two great souls with us, two individuals who are very, very dear to my heart, Mukunda Prabhu and Madhurika Prabhu. They are I So we're from South Africa. Mukunda and Madhurika are from South Africa, and so am I. And the yatra where I joined Krishna Consciousness, the Stellenbosch yatra in the Western Cape province, is pretty close to a beautiful, beautiful coastal town called Pringle Bay. And Mukunda and Madhurika were based in Pringle Bay, and they had the most amazing home where they would regularly host great souls from all over the world. Govinda Maharaj used to really, really love to go and stay there with them. I remember seeing Devamrita Maharaj there at their place. Madhava Prabhu came around, and many other great souls. Mukunda Prabhu, I'm sure you've hosted Giriraj Maharaj, your own spiritual master, I imagine. And they're just such incredible, exemplary grihastas. And, as a kind of yatra of very, very young devotees, we were so lucky to have them and to see their example, and to always be able to go and take shelter of their care and affection and very level-headed words of advice. And but yeah, then a few years ago we were very sad to see them go. Their sons Nitai and Kishore kind of came of age, and so they decided to move to Alatra, where the boys could have more dynamic opportunities and community to associate with, and so on. And anyway, so we had to see them go. I haven't seen them since that time. This is actually the first time we're seeing each other since that time, probably since we saw each other physically. So for me personally, my heart is so warm to have Mukunda and Madhurika with us, and I'm just very grateful to you guys for coming. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, nice to see you too, and it's such warm praise. It's great memories for us to look back on those days in Pringle Bay.
Oh, what a special time. Such a special time. So Mukunda Prabhu is also...
I feel like slightly left out, but I'm also happy to get a chance to meet you.
I wish we could take you and invite you and host you back there, but maybe in Alatra one day.
Yeah,
actually, yeah, I know. I actually asked Abai. I said, "Can we get Jai Jagannath for lunch?" And then your schedule didn't work, so you're on our radar.
He didn't tell me about that, but
okay. He wanted you all for himself.
We can understand that. We can understand. I would also be very, very possessive of Jai if he came and stayed with me, for sure.
Okay, I feel better. Thank you.
Anyway, just maybe like one or two more introductory words. Mukunda Prabhu, I was just mentioning just before we came on that he does something pretty rare. He works in Hollywood. He's as a director and a script writer. He can tell us maybe a little bit more about what he does in just a second, but it's a career that not a lot of devotees are really into. He was only able to mention maybe one or two other people that he knows about that kind of works in that general realm in Tinseltown. So he's a very interesting, unique individual, and as far as I understand, Madhurika has been pretty much exclusively focused on parenting and raising the boys, Nitai and Kishore, and and she does so incredibly thoughtfully and consciously. I've always, that was one thing that I always observed very. I always observed being around them how they were so they were so consequential with their boys. They would always point out, like, when the boys would needed to be disciplined, they would do so in a gentle and a loving way. And, but at the same time, they were always so affectionate and accommodating and really, really exemplary parents. And Madhurika has actually recently published some articles specifically on parenting teenagers, since that what they're dealing with at the moment, with the boys being in that phase. And I'll post a link just now where you can go and see one of her articles on Dandavats. So that's kind of okay. I feel like I should stop speaking right now, and maybe Jai, you can kind of just lead us into the next part of the discussion.
Yeah, just I'll be holding my mic. I know it's a little ghetto, but I had an issue with my mic stand, so I'm not gonna go through all the details. But if y'all like wondering how ghetto this looks, that's the reason. Problem with my mic stand. Also, I like to say I did put a thumbs up for hearing about Madhurika just like kind of doing the mother thing. Not that a lady should not do other things, but personally, I saw my own mother make tremendous sacrifices in her own like personal life and like personal build in her career to take care of us. And so for me, a mother is like the most important person in my own personal experience and life. So I just think it's super heroic when ladies are stepping forward to just like, I'm going to do the mother thing. I think it's beautiful. I think it's awesome. And I don't think it gets enough esteem in our present culture. And so, and that might contribute to why people aren't so interested in it anymore. Anyway, so just in case anyone's like, wait, why is Jai putting a thumbs up? Is he being sexist? Or no, I'm not being sexist. I'm acknowledging the sort of people I consider to be heroes in my own personal life and personal life experience. So that's just me explaining that, just in case someone's going to nail me for that. It might happen. So I just want to cover my bases. Yeah, let's start with our first question is like, how did you guys meet? Like, it's conscious relationships. And, I feel like in an older world, there was like a whole courting process. Like, I personally like Victorian England movies. Like, I try not to watch movies too much, but if I do end up watching them, I'm really into like Victorian old school, like English, late 19th century sort of stuff. And there's like this whole like process of like courting someone. And so we kind of wanted to hear about the process of getting together, because that I was imagine that our processes today are a little bit different with dating apps and so on. So what was that process for you?
Well, we met maybe 19 or 20 years ago, so it was a slightly different time. I don't think the dating apps and all were, happening as much. It was interesting because we were both kind of associated with the Cape Town Temple, more or less, which is a very small temple, and everyone knows each other. It's like a tiny place. But somehow Mukunda was traveling as his Guru Maharaj's assistant, and I was traveling for like 7 years in Asia, traveling and working. So we never met and we never knew each other at all until we met. So I don't know. Do you want to tell the story? I always tell it, so I thought maybe I could hear it from your perspective.
I was a brahmachari, and then I changed ashrams, and after a short period of time, I realized, I need to get a wife. And it was very clear in my head. And so I just went and, okay, let's just get a wife. And I was kind of very active, like, because I traveled a bit, I would like try and meet someone or like let people know I'm looking for a wife. And I met one or two people and it didn't really work. And then one day I was back in Cape Town and I was on the balcony and she walked into the temple, and I was immediately struck by her posture and her grace. I was like, wow, okay, who's that? And then we had a program, and then after the program, I kind of got her email address on some false pretext about teaching or food for life.
Oh my God, email address. That sounds so ancient.
Yeah. And then I wrote her a letter because I knew she was traveling back to wherever, Taiwan. And I wrote her a letter and I just said, I'm really attracted to you. I just said
it was actually better than that. It was actually like this poetic, because he's a writer and he just pulled out all the stars.
Yeah, I just went all in. I just jumped off the cliff. Yeah.
It was amazing. It's kind of a love letter out of the blue, you know. So
okay, wait. How much time did you actually spend in each other's presence after this letter manifested? Did you meet like once?
Before
the letter.
Yeah, before the letter. Yeah, because you first saw Madhurika coming in to the temple that one time.
Yeah. So I saw her walk in, and then I actually gave class, which was Krishna setting me up.
And he looked very saintly in his whites and sitting on the Jasmine side.
And I'm sure I made prolonged eye contact with her.
Oh no, stop it.
I was gonna anyway. So then I saw her, and then during the serve out, I kind of threw some forks in her hand. I said, "Hand those out." And then the next, was it?
That was previous.
How long were you in Cape?
That was just, and then we spoke briefly after the program, and that was it. We spoke for maybe.
When did I get your email address?
After the program.
Yeah, so it's just a one day.
Like
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty decisive. I don't always get it right, but I just thought she seemed great. I mean, I think karmically also often it happens like that. The person comes and it does things to you because you're at that stage and you meant to, and that just happened like that. And then I wrote the letter, and I really kind of just laid it out. And then I kind of anxiously waited for, I don't know how long it took. How long did it take to write back? Do you remember? Anyway, and then I got it back, and then she indicated almost, there was an indication. You didn't say I feel the same way, but there was an indication, okay, this something's happening here. And then we exchanged letters for quite a long time, which was great. I mean, for me, it's my strength to write.
Exchanging letters versus exchanging text.
Yeah.
It sounds more romantic.
Letters where we both kind of like went on flurries of descriptions about whatever. Yeah, and then at some stage, I think it was a couple of months, I said, well, we should talk on the phone because we hadn't even spoken on the phone.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we spoke on the phone, and then we said, okay, well, we should meet. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. Anyway, so she agreed, and I got a place on the beach. I really like, because we hadn't actually spent time together. Right. So she flew down to spend 2 weeks with me, who she barely knew, in a beachside cabin. And little did she tell me she bought a one-way ticket back. She didn't tell me that. So, and then, then we fell in love, and we've kind of been together ever since.
Wow, that sounds incredibly romantic. I think our generation can only hope for such an experience.
It was kind of like that, you were saying the Victorian dating thing, because of having that period where we were writing and getting to know each other, everything was kind of slow. And that was really nice, having that extended period of slowly getting to know each other. It was nice.
The time that the two of you found each other, and increasingly so before that, I see it to be just so much more conducive to like perceiving destiny having brought you together with another person, because now it's like everyone is just so incredibly overexposed to all the options and the possibilities out there with first with social media, and now we have dating apps as well, and it's just kind of like, it's just so bewildering, like all the possibilities and all the novelty and everything, whereas like in your time, it was just you had limited opportunities to come across a potential partner, and then it's just like, so then when that moment happens, it's like, it's just so much, it's like you're so much more receptive to that moment and appreciating it for what it is in all of its significance.
I
It's
think so.
beautiful.
I think so. Yeah, and somehow we were really lucky in that, when everything was just very magical and romantic and kind of perfect, at the beach house, there were dolphins jumping and rainbows. It was like really the whole thing. So, I mean, sometimes people wonder if that's necessary, that kind of falling in love, at the start of a relationship. And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily required, but it definitely helped in our case. It definitely helps you feel like, okay, I want to pursue this. This is something that I feel like it feels like it's the right thing, and let's go forward.
I will say, I mean, because I think you want to get into the nitty-gritty, that we jokingly talk about how we lied to each other during that time.
Not lied, like false advertising.
Yeah, and like we were on our best behavior, and she was on her best behavior, and but the real thing is not the falling in love, because that's not easy, but it's almost ordained, and it's providence that you meant to actually get into the illusion that this is whatever, and that fixes you, and then the work actually starts. We realize, oh, like, it's still funny. There was a moment on that holiday where I scratched one of her CDs because I carelessly just put it like
in
the bag in the sand or whatever. And she said something to me, and I was like, wow, like it broke the bubble a little bit, because she was like, how can you be so careless? And I was like, how can you ruin our mood? But in hindsight, like, that thing, my careless kind of nature and her has become an issue, and we've had to deal with that. So the problem is that those early days are they're very poor indicators of what a relationship will be like. And I think that there's that saying, love is what remains when being in love has burnt away. Like, because that early days it's just not a good indicator at all. And the real work actually starts where your natures actually come out, and you're more honest about who you are. You're not trying to impress anymore. And then you have to go, oh, okay, so, well, now how do we have a relationship? How does that relationship work? Because fundamentally, some people have very good marriage karma, but there are very few of them, actually, because being in Kali Yuga, most of us have bad karma in every sphere. So your relationship karma is probably going to be trying, and the relationship that you have with your wife is one of the real ways where you're going to have to do a lot of work, and how you deal with that is very important too. So I mean, it was a wonderful time. We fell in love, and we always look back on it so fondly. But I'm actually I'm more kind of, when I look back, I'm kind of happy about how I've grown, how she's grown in our relationship, how we've dealt with our ugly parts and in each other like that. And I think that for a relationship to work, it's, yes, the honeymoon, but it's actually not an indicator. And how do you deal with the difficult times is way more important.
Definitely got some questions about that. Just what you're saying now kind of transitions to one, like, sort of base question that we always ask all of our couples when they come on is, I think this is attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, but he says that in the West, they marry the girl that they love, and in the East, they love the girl that they marry. And so he's kind of speaking of this sort of dynamic of like love versus duty. Basically, that's how I understand that. So I was kind of wanting to, you've already kind of started to get into it, but I'd like to hear from both of you, maybe expounding on this a little bit more. Yeah, that sort of dynamic between love and duty, because I think everyone would like to have that sort of romantic, it's about love. But then when you actually get into a relationship, it's about duty. But sometimes if duty gets pressed too hard and people don't feel the love part so much, it can also be a cause of breaking of the relationship. So I'm kind of wondering how that tension worked out or plays itself out in your relationship?
I just wanna make it a little bit more specific, because to a large extent you've already said that you it was the falling in love which really brought you together. And Mukunda Prabhu, you were pointing out that it's like, that has its utility. It's like it's ordained, because that's what brings two people together, and it has its purpose, right? So then I would like to ask you, what was the moment, like, from maybe I don't know if it was one moment for both of you, but maybe each of your respective moments of kind of like your head coming out of the bubble and suddenly looking at this person and being like, like what was it about each other that you kind of, or what did you see? What was that moment that you realized this is going to take work to get through?
You go, I'm sure you've got a list.
I don't know if I have a specific moment. I can't really think. I mean, this is a long time ago, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have a moment?
Well, I remember on the phone, I remember on her letters, and actually on the phone call as well, I sensed some things about her that it was just made me realize, oh, there's, and I just realized this, it's not, I just realized that, she's a conditioned soul like you, like I am, like everybody is,
Sure.
And so, and I think that I mean, I can talk forever here. So about.
All right. Well, you
but yeah, let's go to Jai's thing. Sorry, Karuna. Yeah, it does. I saw that in the phone call. She said one thing, and I realized she's kind of. I mean, I don't want to highlight her faults. I don't want to do that. I just realized that she was doing something which was somewhat not on the heart level. She was doing something. I got to understand her nature a little bit, and everybody's nature is conditioned. But I don't feel comfortable.
I mean, I would say that for us, in many ways, we're very compatible. We're culturally, socially compatible. Similar level of interest in Krishna consciousness, similar interest in terms of intellectual, creative, all of that. And the one major difference is our natures, which are very different or even opposite. So for us, wherever the sticking points have come up, or the friction or the difficulty, it's usually because of that difference in nature,
Like the way that you approach a practical situation. For example, Mukunda Prabhu may be just kind of practical, let's get it done, boom, 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 where you're more thoughtful about it, want to consider everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we sometimes joke that I would love to be able to just think about things for days and weeks and months and never have to do anything. That's like my dream. And he would love to just be able to act and never think.
Right. Yeah.
Super decisive, super speedy, all of those kind of things. I'm very thoughtful.
And I make mistakes, and she doesn't want to make mistakes. And I'm like, they're just mistakes. I'm like, no, it's a mistake. Yeah. So because of our Krishna consciousness, it's actually not as big as a problem as it really could have been. We've grown, I've become healthier, and she's become healthier in her nature. So it's not as bad as it could be, which is one of the overriding things that I kind of think about couples. To make it work, you've got to know how to grow and love. And that's our process of Krishna consciousness is really helpful like that. It's an incredible helpful tool to be spiritually working on yourself, because it helps with your relationships a lot. So that's helped us tremendously. But that difference of nature is a real thing to work with.
How did you guys process when you would come to those rub points because of the difference in nature? And you were saying Christian consciousness helped it not be as bad as it probably could have been. But in our community, it doesn't seem like the Christian conscious element has been too helpful for couples when they meet this rub point. I mean, the high divorce rate, we had an episode about that. So I'm curious how for you, you felt that Christian consciousness principles or whatever helped y'all be reconciled to one another when those rub points came up because of difference in nature.
Can I take this one?
Sure.
I don't think it's been so much directly like, okay, a fight comes up, now we're gonna read Shastra. It hasn't been like that.
Right,
you know?
right.
But it has been by trying to like chant sincerely, regularly, by spending quite a lot of time in the Holy Dham, because we were really lucky. We got to spend time in Mayapur. And we felt as a family over several years. And we felt that it really acted on us, being in that spiritual atmosphere of the Dham, and helped like bring up, loosen stuff in the heart, deep conditioning issues, kind of loosen things up, bring them to the surface, helped us clear those away and actually be moving forward as people with our own hang-ups and issues and everything. So I think it's more in that sense that there's been a sincere willingness to work on ourselves, but also that the process of Krishna consciousness gives the ability or the Shakti to be able to transform. Because what happens is, lots of people read relationship help or self-help or this or that, but somehow struggle to actually change. So I think that dynamic process of Krishna consciousness has helped us a lot to be able to grow and move out of the conditioned, limited little selves to some extent. Is that what you meant?
Yeah. Just on your point, Jai Jagannath, Krishna consciousness in its real form does help because you taught how to love and be kind.
And have relationships.
And our whole process is relationships. So the externals of Krishna consciousness, sure, I don't know, that's something else, but the internal, the real heart of our Krishna consciousness or our love of God is actually how to be kind and how to be loving to people and how to, be humble and how to consider that the person next to you is a struggling jiva and has conditioning like you have. And do I love this person or do I like get angry? Or it's compassion. It's really compassion. And Krishna consciousness has made me a far more sensitive and compassionate person, which without that, I wouldn't have been able to be kind to her in her difficult times. She wouldn't have been able to be kind to me in my difficult times. We would have the ego would have fought for dominance. And that's where the whole process of us is to get rid of that ego. So I'm internally grateful for the process. And I really believe that we're sitting here today happy with the kids because of that process. And without it, I think that those differences of nature are quite extreme and would have been quite damaging.
Amazing points.
I don't want to digress too much on this. It's just a little bit of a follow-up. And this question isn't meant to be a commentary or to seek a commentary on what's happening in our community, but I'm just kind of curious, like what gets lost? I feels like something is lost in translation for a lot of Christian conscious couples. Like just the high level of divorce rate. I know people who are separated or divorced, and sometimes I want to ask them, like, how come your Christian conscious principles didn't translate into this relationship? I mean, if it's all about loving and all of that, how come that didn't get translated into the relationship to make it successful, as you guys are speaking of it here? Or maybe asking it in a positive way, what is it? I guess, what is it about how you received Christian consciousness that allowed it to help you in your relationship? And I'm asking this for, there are couples who here, we've had letters come from couples that said that our episodes on these relationships have helped their marriage. So I'm asking for those potential couples also, like, what is it? How did you receive Christian consciousness that allowed it to help y'all in your relationship? That sounds a little ghetto, but that's my question.
Well, actually, we kind of through trial and error, because I think at the beginning we suffered due to an immature application of our idea of what it was to be a devotee couple. And I think many people possibly go through this, especially if you're someone who joins, you just take on this whole Krishna consciousness thing as you perceive it. Like you just take it all on. And you kind of think, well, this is what a devotee wife should be like. This is what a devotee husband should be like. And it's often based on, random statements here or there, or something that you might have read, but it's not taken in context, or you're not getting guidance from older, experienced people. So what you try and apply is just out of context and often not helpful. It caused us a lot of strain and actually distress in our relationship because of some kind of idea that maybe, the wife should be submissive to the husband's role is that, the wife's role is that. And it didn't, and just at some point we realized that it wasn't working. And we also realized that we have to float our own boat. Like, we're responsible for our relationship. We're responsible for the decisions we make for our kids, for our family. And that we can't just kind of take on some philosophy or what we think is a philosophy and just say, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to follow blindly no matter what. So we just started being a lot more proactive in terms of, hold on, this doesn't feel right. We need to do something about this. Or, we need skills to deal with this problem. That kind of thing. Want to add something?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add one thing. Sorry.
Sure.
Part of that is also learning to be more personal about the way we approach Krishna consciousness. Not personal, like this is what a devotee does, this is what I must do, but kind of, who am I? What are my needs? How do I relate? What inspires me? So approaching our Krishna consciousness in a more dynamic and personal way, as opposed to like a rote way. And then that helped us to find tools and find ways of moving forward when there were issues.
Well said.
Yes. So the Krishna conscious, like, what did we do right? What you were asking, or what gifts did we get? I do think that the one thing is that we actually practiced. We practice. We actually take it quite seriously. And everyone has whether they're readers or they like to do save or they like to chant. So whatever the thing is, you try to do that properly. Then you start to get realizations, and then you realize that Madhurika isn't removed from my Krishna consciousness. My wife, I sometimes think that you kind of got to go through your spouse to Krishna. In other words, your relationships have to work. So if this is not working, I can't just then go with Krishna, and that can't just work. Because I often you hear that advanced people, they say that everything is Krishna. In other words, everything's happy. He's involved in all of these things. So if this is not working, I got to see it in the larger context, that this is not a separate thing. This is part of everything. So I've definitely felt personally that the processes, by applying them, have helped me see that Madhurika is not different from my Krishna consciousness, from my relationship with Krishna, with Krishna's energy, like that. So therefore, I'm more sensitive to go, okay, what am I? If she might be, there's this saying where it's called kiss the hag, which means that you got to love someone, you have to love the ugly person within them. And I have an ugly part of me, and she has an ugly part of her, and she's seen my ugly part, and it's horrific, and I've seen hers. But to love someone, you actually have to love that too. But the capacity to love that and not just go, oh, that's an ugly part, you got better work on that, comes from a growth of Krishna consciousness, which I'm grateful that I had a little glimpse of how to do it every now and again, where, oh, she's just suffering. Oh, I'm just suffering. Help a suffering person. You try to be kind to them. Because I made the huge mistake of trying to correct Madhurika too much in the beginning. And that correcting, you can't try and change your spouse. They can maybe change themselves if they're inspired. you can just try and love them. And I definitely overcorrected a lot that she still has wounds from. She has learned to also tell me, hey, back off, which she didn't do in the beginning. So she's got healthier to go, hey, back off, which she didn't in the beginning. She didn't. So I thought, oh, this is definitely my role. She's meekly and humbly just following. It was a mess. So
but that's a beautiful thing, Prabhu, because it also takes like some genuine humility as well to, like, you know, when you because Mukunda, Prabhu, you've got a very strong personality, and you're very confident, and you're a very intelligent person. So it's like you perceive a situation to be in a certain way, and you're like, she's wrong, she's got to be like this. And then Madhurika's like, hey, listen here, mister, don't you come tell me, you know. Then you really have to be very humble to accept that, you know, and swallow that.
Can I just say, what I've learned to do is not so much, hey, listen here, mister.
That was a figurative statement.
I know, but it's more like, whatever, and do whatever I think, you know.
But there was a period where you started, you got to now, anyway, that's his stuff. But there was a period where you had to start asserting, where you started doing that. Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of things, but one thing I'm really appreciating is that the responsibility to change is on the individual.
Yeah.
But you can try to, you know, hold space by loving them and allowing them the space to do the work they need to do to change themselves. That seems like a very useful thing to know when you're entering a relationship.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I wanted to move on to another thing.
Jai, sorry, before you do that, I have I really loved Madhurika's point of, like, personalizing Krishna consciousness and kind of setting aside these ideas of, or like these very, like, you know, this is how it's meant to be and we're going to do it in this way. So I would just love to hear maybe like one personal example of how you were stifling your relationship, or maybe even your Krishna consciousness, through trying to fanatically practice some particular thing that was just suffocating you, and then reaching a moment of clarity and being like, listen, this isn't working, and now I'm going to personalize it for myself in this way. Can you just give us an example of such an experience?
Let me just think.
In one sense, Madhurika, you kind of did when you were talking about, like, the sort of the archetype of a proper Vedic wife, and like trying to fit into that, and then realizing, like, nope, that's not, I'm not gonna really fit that archetype. I need to, like, make an adjustment.
Yeah, but I'm asking the question because, like, there's a lot to the archetype, or like to the archetypal Vedic. Well, there's many aspects, you know. So I'm just wondering, like, what have you retained, and what have you felt to be stifling and suffocating?
Well, I really appreciate, you know, the idea of the Vedic wife and mother, what I understand of it. And like at the beginning, Jai Jagannath, where you were saying, you know, praising mothers who really focus on their motherhood and everything. I love that. And I've always been super grateful to Mukunda that he has from the beginning said, don't worry, you don't have to work. I've got this, and you can do the home thing, not in a patriarchal way, like I'm the man and you stay home. Not at all. You know, I'm free to do whatever I want. But his mood has always been, what you're doing is so important. This is so valuable, like looking after the people in our family and creating the culture of our family intentionally. Not that it just kind of evolves into whatever it is because we're all busy and never at home, you know. So there's that I've always felt very validated in wanting to be a homemaker and the kind of the heart of the home and the person who looks after everyone. But, you know, I'm not, that kind of idea of that I would walk behind my husband, or I wouldn't interrupt him, or I wouldn't contradict him, or that kind of weird cultural stuff that just...
Not that weird.
Yeah, so maybe that's what he was hoping for at the beginning, obeisances every morning and whatever. But
Right.
yeah, so I've kept the part of that. But the other part of that is that, I wasn't raised in that kind of culture. I was raised to be independent thinking. I'm an educated person. We're kind of equals in many ways. And there's certain aspects of our life where I take the lead, and there's certain aspects of our life where he takes the lead. So, that would be one example. And then another example would be, as a family, we spent a lot of time in Mayapur over some years when the boys were smaller. And it was an amazing experience for us. And I also got to observe that you can't just assume that something is necessarily good for your family. Like, okay, to live in the Dharm, it must be good for your family. Well, actually, it might be or it might not be. If it means that your family is split up because the dad is earning money elsewhere and the mom and the kids are not protected, it might not be good. Or if there's not proper engagement for your teenagers and they start getting into trouble, it might not be good. The point is just that there are certain things about Krishna consciousness that we may think should be good. Oh, it should be good to force my kids to go to the morning program every day. But we have to kind of use our intelligence a little bit to evaluate, like, does this work for us?
We're allowed to do that. When did that get allowed?
Yeah, so that would be kind of what a big part of the process has been for us, evaluating what works for us.
Excellent.
Very nice.
Excellent.
Because Karuna also said we kind of want to get into the parenting, which you guys have a lot of experience with. This sort of opening into that areas. How did your relationship transform after having kids? Because it seems like it's one dynamic before kids and like a very different dynamic after having kids.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to sideline what Jai is asking, but I just quickly want to hear about the timeline. So you first met, you went on that romantic getaway. How long after that did you get married? And then how long after marriage did you have Nitai?
We got married. That was probably in May of
It's all very
year.
quick. We
May of the
didn't
one
leave
year.
each other since
And then we were together.
Uh,
And then we got married, I think we got married the following year, and we had Nita immediately. So, immediately after that, the following year. So it was all pretty quick.
Okay, well, okay. Change of psyche before Nitai to after Nitai manifested.
Okay. Well, I think for all couples, it's like before kids and after kids. It's just such a life-changing thing. It wasn't an easy transition for me, definitely, because I was used to being very independent. I traveled for like 7 years, just all over. And suddenly your life becomes very small in a sense. You're just at home with a baby. So that was challenging. But I think by the time we had Kishore, we kind of got into it. We got used to it. This was our life now. But the thing is, it changes the relationship between the couples so much because, the kids just become this all-consuming, important thing that pretty much take over your whole life. And I think it's hard for everyone. It's also hard for the man because, in a sense, generally he kind of loses his wife because, it was us. We were best friends. We were it. And then suddenly these other people come along and they become the complete love of your wife's life. And all of her attention generally is focused on that. And I think that the husband's needs tend to fall like way down to the bottom of the list. And this is something that happens naturally in couples, but it's also important for us to be aware to maintain the relationship, to keep the relationship alive, and to still, take care of each other. because there comes another phase when the kids leave, they grow up and they leave, and then it's just you two. And we've seen that with people, that if it's just all been about the kids and there hasn't been any effort to nurture the couple relationship, once kids are off doing their own thing, there are two people who are just like, there's nothing left. They haven't put in anything. It's just been like a working relationship of all the stuff we have to get done to, manage the family. And Mukunda's always been really good about fighting for the relationship. He's always said to me, hey, this is important. You and we're important because this is the primary relationship. And they're going to go and have their own lives. And we need to keep our relationship solid. So, yeah.
Wow.
Mukunda Prabhu, maybe you can tell us about like maintaining that relationship consciousness, you could say, and like how did the two of you implement keeping the relationship rich and alive amidst the all the attention that your children required and so on?
Yeah. My mother actually was quite, first of all, Madhurika was great. I didn't feel actually that neglected, but I do feel that we did work on it. We did spend the time. My mother would often encourage us, we'll take the kids, you go away, we'd go away on her birthday for like 2 nights somewhere. And I think we did that well. And I completely agree with Madhurika's point that if you don't, sometimes the kids bring up some cracks in the relationship, and then the wife often, she's actually fully satisfied with the kid, and the guy, she kind of wasn't so sure about it.
He's the extra.
He just becomes this peripheral dude who walks around and occasionally kind of does stuff. Yeah, and that's not so good, because as you say, when the kids go, they kind of look at each other and go, all right, so what do we do now? And I think, the largest thing that I think is helpful for couples to hear is that when the kids come, the difficulties actually come, because then it's a real relationship. In the beginning, it's just, I think you just disregard anything before the kids.
Oh, that's a little.
But it's just,
that's heavy.
It hasn't been tested. The relationship hasn't been tested. But anyway, when the kids come, there's a lot more work and a lot less pleasure in some ways. And then you look at the relationship and you go, well, I'm not getting the pleasure I want. And a lot of relationships actually break down when the kids, like, they've got a 2-year-old and there's a newborn, because it's just so much work and not much back. And then the man just goes, oh, this is not good. I'm done. I'm going out of here. And that's terrible. And it's tragic, and it ruins lives completely. And I think the largest thing to help understand is that not everything that we look at is just a pleasure vessel for us to suck pleasure out of. And when we stop sucking the pleasure out of this, well, I'm done. So where's the next thing I can go get pleasure out of? And that is a fundamental process of spiritual life, which I'm talking about, is to realize we don't just take from everything. So like, I remember times thinking, this is hellish. The boys were down, they were crying. Madhurika hasn't slept. I haven't slept. It's just, and there's just no pleasure. It's horrible. And to accept that this is the relationship I got into, this is the agreement we made to have these children. This is all our doing and all our responsibility. And because it gets difficult, I don't just bail, but I kind of accept that this is this thing for me, because I'm quite a passionate and kind of pleasure-seeking person, that I've had to realize that the world is not there for me to just absorb pleasures from. And that's been a growth that's been quite helpful, where, okay, it's difficult, and let me kind of hunker down and try and help, as opposed to, why isn't she not giving me some time now, or whatever. So I think that I would encourage couples that it will only get worse often when you break a relationship, because you're just not getting the pleasures you used to. You're not going to be, a lot of people I don't find going on to live happier lives. They go on to have that same mood, but now they've got a broken family that they're also having to deal with. But if you pull through and try a little bit of selfless growth, I think it can be, it helped me a lot. I found kids came, to realize to try and serve this more than to try and take from this more.
Mukunda Prabhu, that's an amazing point, and what makes me even more excited about it is that something I'm kind of reading between the lines of what you're saying, which makes that attitude, I feel, sustainable and possible to genuinely have, is that in order to not see the world as just like a big playground for having different pleasures, and and then being able to stick it out and do the work that's necessary, it's so important for a person to have a sense of independent fulfillment. Like, you as an individual need to be okay with yourself. You need to be a fulfilled human being standing on your own 2 feet, right? You need to have accepted yourself in order to have the actual reserves to be able to sacrifice and not seek like the instant gratification, because you've almost got like a golden thread or like a baseline of fulfillment that kind of carries you through, and enough of a sense of meaning and purpose. So I'm just wondering how you relate to that, and if you think that's true, or if you think that's just kind of idealistic and we can't necessarily have that, or do you think that that's kind of like an indispensable thing?
I think it's a very big topic, and it's important. And if you're not looking after some fundamental things, they say, like, you can't feed a hungry man shlokas. Like, if there's some basic needs are not being met, if you're suffering, it's very hard. If you're winning, it's very hard. It's very easy to be generous and kind, but when you're suffering individually because of, as you say, unmet needs or something, it is very difficult. And most people, we're all broken, and we have so much of that. But I have to say that in my experience, this practice of Krishna consciousness has helped tremendously on these things, because how do you actually get that nourishment you're seeking when you are so conditioned and so broken? I understand if you're hungry, you eat. If you need some time out, you take some time out. And those activities that we do to look after these basic things are necessary, but that satisfaction or that fullness to actually give back, I actually only think can come spiritually, and you need to apply a process which can give you that, to make you a little fuller. And if you don't have that, it's a little bit like adjusting the chairs on the Titanic. Yes, you can, because there's a fundamental need we all have. And unless that fundamental need is being met, the secondaries, you can meet them, but it's never going to actually satisfy enough. So I would encourage people to try and find the process that actually gives you that, because my wife can't give me that. And a big thing, I think, to realize about a marriage or a family, it's not their job to make you happy. It's not Madhurika's job to make me happy, and it's not my job to make her happy. And you see so many people, they get divorced because they say, well, he didn't make me happy anymore. But it's not his job. And these are such big questions. But primarily, you need to nourish some deeper spiritual parts of yourself. So I would encourage you to do a spiritual practice that works for you, so that you can be nourished there. Otherwise, you'll be looking for that nourishment in your children, in your relationships, in sex, in so many other things, which will only give you a small satisfaction. You'll always ultimately be unsatisfied, and therefore not be able to give.
Yeah. Okay, I think you've done what?
I said I'm just very appreciative of that focus on spirituality, because it does appear, I mean, obviously from the secular world, but even in our own devotional communities, it does appear that it happens that spirituality gets sidelined in favor of this technique and this new thing and that thing and other. And so I'm just really appreciating, like, no, the fundamental problem is a spiritual one, and it can only be addressed spiritually. And so you have to find that. And I'm also appreciating, like, find a spiritual practice that works for you, whatever it is, but the fundamental issue is a spiritual one. And I'm appreciating that emphasis, because it's kind of popular. It's a little bit in vogue to be like, yeah, spirituality, but, and then, this, that, and the other thing. So I was just saying, wonderful. I really appreciated that. It makes sense to me also.
I'd just like to add one thing that Mukunda quite early on kind of had this realization, and that's helped us a lot. You know, when you're a young family, there's so much work to do, there's so little time, and the demands of a Krishna conscious lifestyle can feel like way too much, totally overwhelming. Like, who can do that? Who can, go to Mangalarti, study, blah, blah, all the things that we're supposed to do. And he was like, you know what? Let's just figure out the two things that we really like doing in devotional life, and let's try and focus on those. And so for us, what we came to, it was serving devotees and chanting. And those were going to be the two things that we really try to do and put our hearts into. And that was a really good practical thing, because when you feel like I have to do 50 things, you get discouraged and you're like, who can do that? I'm going to quit. But if you just, focus on small, manageable things that you like and that you can do, that's a really good way to.
I'm laughing because, the residents of Kulina Gram, when they asked Mahaprabhu 3 consecutive years, like, what are the duties of a Grihasta? And Mahaprabhu says, Nam Sankirtan and Vaishnav Seva. And that's why I smiled when you gave that particular. I was like, go figure.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. We definitely need to talk about kids and being parents. And okay, so initially, I just feel like we have so much to talk about, and almost like it actually requires a second episode to really do justice to the parenting topic. We'll have to have another discussion at some point, and I think we can do that. But I guess let's start that discussion now. So I just want to hear from Jai. Jai, do you have anything which has?
I have tons of things, but I'll start here. On my Instagram the other day, when I came back to New York, I was on the plane with these wild toddlers. They were white body. I'm just saying, I've only seen this with white body toddlers. They were so freaking wild on the plane, and the parents were completely helpless and like regulating the behaviors of their children on the plane. Like they must have been about 2 years old, 2, 3, 4 years old, like that. So I made a little story showing frustration, and I was, saying that, can we please bring back the belt? That was my punchline, because I grew up getting, whoopings, and I thought it was great. Like I do think there's a difference between being disciplined and being abused, so I wasn't speaking to that. But I was like, can we bring back the belt? Like children need to learn that there are boundaries, and they need to learn that there are consequences for crossing them. And I've never seen, like, sorry to say this, but I've never seen like Black kids or Latin kids wilding out in front of their parents like that. So I was just like, I don't know what's going on with these white toddlers, but y'all need to bring back the belt, bring back chastisement. And I thought, and I was being a little bit like facetious. I was being funny. People who know my personality, they thought it was funny, but there are people who aren't so familiar with my personality. So they got very offended by that story. And they didn't tell me directly, but they told my friends who told me, like, Jai shouldn't be saying things like this. Why is he promoting, abuse or whatever? So I'm kind of very interested in how about training children, the process of training children, particularly nowadays, because when I was growing up, there wasn't internet. I mean, the internet was just starting to come up, but I have noticed that parents are allowing the internet to raise their children. And as a result of it, children are not learning healthy things like boundaries and consequences for crossing boundaries and things like that. So I'm kind of interested. I think parents would need to hear this also. Advice and helping them discipline children, but just train them and not allowing it to be co-opted by these external sources that don't seem to be very favorable for raising children. So how did especially with spirituality, I guess it gets a little bit strange too, because you want to give them the values that you have spiritually, but you don't want to impose it lest they become averse to it. So how did this process come about? Like let's start there.
Well, I think that nowadays there's definitely a whole trend towards very, in some cases, permissive parenting. And, people are wanting to make sure, people are very afraid of damaging their kids emotionally or psychologically.
Right.
And so that's made a lot of parents very kind of tentative about their role as parents. So I guess what we just decided to do was to raise our kids in the way that made sense to us. And I guess it's a little bit more traditional in the sense that, we felt that kids do need structure and boundaries, and we want them to be relatively pleasant to be around, not to be like a total menace that to society and to people at large, that, they're just ungovernable. I definitely think part of it is cultural. Like, we're from South Africa, which is the culture of raising kids, and I'm sure probably this is how you were raised, Karuna, is more traditional in terms of that the parents make the decisions and run the family and kind of raise the kids. They don't facilitate the kids to raise themselves, which is kind of is more in some places. So we kind of felt that we want to be really loving. We don't want to be authoritarian, overly disciplinarian, etc. But that, kids' minds are very unstable, and like all of our minds are wild, but kids' minds are very just all over the place, and they don't have the intelligence yet. So the adults need to supply the intelligence to say, hey, I know you want to do that, but it's not safe, or it's getting dark, or whatever. So the parent needs to supply the guidance and the intelligence that the child doesn't have because he's 3 or he's 5 and he just doesn't know. Actually, it's interesting. A lot of our conflict in the relationship has arisen around parenting styles because our styles are different. Mukunda's much more strict, I guess you could say, and I'm not permissive, but I'm very negotiable. I'm very, I'm more considerate of what they're feeling and what they're thinking and that kind of thing. So it's been an issue for us. We had to how we've resolved it is more or less you do it your way and I do it my way.
We haven't resolved it.
We couldn't.
Hasn't it resolved?
Well, but we've both gone healthier on it.
Right, we've come closer. I've become better at implementing the structures and the boundaries and the consequences, and he's become better at being more flexible. So
I do have some regrets, like being a little insensitive to these little guys, like trying to, and Madhurika helped me see that, but overall the child leads the way philosophy, I think, is dangerous because the children don't know. That's why they have parents. I mean, that's the natural order of these things. So it's better that the parents lead the way, and the parents see, oh, the child has a need, so how can I, as opposed, America's super permissive. It's kind of, I think, look,
it's whack. It's whack.
The proof's in the pudding. If the kid's turning into a great, and the other thing is that, like, if the kid takes over, it also takes over the relationship. And I see that a lot of times their relationships suffer, but the kid is whatever, happy with, but the woman is broken by it. They're just constantly running around doing whatever the kid wants. And the man is kind of this outside thing, and it doesn't seem to always work. It's tricky. And also people are very sensitive about their children. It's like an extension of them, and then they get quite defensive. It's quite complicated. And I think people have to find the balance on it, because it's also not pleasant to discipline your child, because the child. So Madhurika doesn't like conflict, and I'm okay to deal with conflict. I don't like it, but okay, it's conflict. But so with boys are boys. They're gonna push and they're gonna see where you guys standing, because I'm gonna take this on, and I'm like, let's take it on then, because he has the line. And it often becomes quite fractious and kind of can be kind of hostile. And Madhurika's dying because this is conflict in the home. But sometimes there's healthy conflict and sometimes there's unhealthy conflict. And I think is to know you can't have too much and you can't have too little. And I think you've got to know where you stand. Is it just too permissive and there's no conflict? Because unfortunately, we don't live in a perfectly harmonious existence. So the conflict is just born of where we live.
Right.
So Madhurika's kind of become a little close to like hearing me rant at the kids. She kind of, all right, I get it. Before it would just be too much. And I'm also like, okay, just don't need a rant, but just say it, you know. Because I think that conflict is there and it can be quite difficult because the boys push. And the boys, I mean, I have, like, Kishore needs a firm boundary from me. Otherwise, he'll just run over all of us. And Nitai, who's a little more, you can explain to Nitai through intelligence. And he goes, I don't like this, but what you're saying is true, so I guess I'll follow it. So, you know, it's a bit of a messy business. And it's not always, it's messy. But
I'm smiling a lot because I'm thinking that when I was growing up, there was no conflict in the house. But my mom made sure that conflict was kept at zero.
It was her way, right?
It was her way. Well, she was a single mom, also raising two boys, so she had to take like the most efficient path because of time, and so it was just like very rigid, very strict. But we never felt unloved by her.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
So that's the big thing there.
Yeah. If you can do it with love and like, I'm not judging you, I'm judging the behavior, I'm not happy about this. That's the thing I had to work on, as opposed to just showing my utter distaste for what you're doing. I had to kind of detach myself a little bit and go, this is, like I often tell the boys, it's my job as my dad. I have to do this. Nature arranged that I'm the dude explaining you and helping you. If I don't do it, I'm just stepping away. And I don't, it's not nice, but it's kind of, I've always found a little duty bound to actually do my job here, however unpleasant it is. But I also have learned through some kind guidance of my wife that sometimes you can just step back, dude. You don't need to like go so hard in.
Right. Yeah. I'm so interested in, I mean, I came across this very interesting book recently called Making Peace with Imperfection, right? Because we tend to really hold ourselves to such high standards. And personally, I am very idealistic. Like I'm always dreaming of beautiful ideals.
Sorry, one thing, you're going to put that all onto your kids when they first come, that idealism, which we also have.
I know, but that's the whole thing. I want to fortify myself against that,
right.
You know, because it's like, it is going to be imperfect. And as you say, Prabhu, it is going to be like it's going to be a messy business, you know, but then, you know, there are but then taking that sort of thing, and then the cynics would say that, you know, as a parent, you're bound to just like mess up your kid in some or other way, right? Like that's what they would say on the extreme. So I think the more sort of balanced question is like, how do you make peace with the messiness of it all? You know, the chaos that there just sometimes inevitably will be, and the imperfection and the mistakes that you make. You know, having this other living being that you've brought into the world, and I mean, I cannot possibly imagine experiencing more love than for a child. You know, so how do you make peace with your imperfection as a parent?
Well, I think it's part of the process of growing up into an adult and making peace with our imperfections in general as humans, and the imperfections in this world, and how there's so many anomalies and so many things that happen that we're just like, how could that happen? And so many mistakes that we make. You know, it's part of, we have to learn tools to process all of that. Wow, I really messed up, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then having the kids is just part of that. It's part of this personalism where we accept, of course, there's no way I can be perfect. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm coming with all my conditioning, with all my stuff. So is my husband. So are the kids. And we're all put together in this kind of pressure cooker situation, in a sense, where we're rubbing up against each other. I think it's just a matter of making peace with the inevitability. Like, there's no way there's not going to be mistakes. There's no way you guys are going to be perfect. But then within that, part of what your kids are going to be learning from you as they grow up is, how do we deal with when life happens, or how do we deal with it when we've really screwed up and, hurt somebody or done something in just a way that we really regret. And that's all part of the process. That's part of what they have to learn to become functioning humans. Not that we're creating this perfect childhood where it's just all, birthday parties and Christmas, and maybe we start off like that when they're little, but part of growing up is like, hey, sometimes life bumps up against you, or sometimes, like, mom really loses it and becomes like an absolute witch and yelling and everything, and then I have to come back from that and explain, geez, guys, that's not how I want to be as a parent, and I'm really sorry, and etc., etc. So I think it's really a matter of accepting the imperfections in all of us and integrating that. How do we deal with that, and how do we try to be better? And then one little point is that you try and make sure that you're not messing up in the like deeply harmful ways, like by shaming them, by really vicious fights with your spouse when the kids are there and like terrified. And there's certain points that are kind of really best avoided. So you try not to create psychological, emotional, and physical harm. But the rest of it, that's just part of being human.
Beautiful. Such a crisp.
It's one thing anecdotally, one thing that happened with us was that when we were in Mayapur, there was this family that we knew, and they were so great, and their kids, but their lives was chaos. It was just chaotic. Like, we were always so proper, like we would have guests and we put out the right things, and we were very proper, and we were kind of anxious about always doing everything properly. And then we looked at their kids and they were so happy and chilled. And we both kind of got the realization that we have to become fat and happy, as opposed to uptight and like
strung out,
and anxious. So we just lowered our standards and concentrated more on being a happy people, because we saw that we were too anxious. Like, if we have a program, we kind of know it now. We just like do this. But in the beginning, that we were all anxious. So this fat and happy philosophy has been great for us. We're both Vata people. We both got kind of high standards. We're both sensitive, and it's a little bit too much. So we just like, to hell with it, Let's work on fat and happy. And it's actually been a great turning point for us as a couple, was to go from whatever it was to go, we're doing fat and happy here. And let's more chill as a family, because we were pretty uptight.
That's beautiful. I love that. Just be happy. But like, just on that though, like, where do you draw the line? Like, where's it?
You asked us before about the devil's advocate. It's a very simple thing. You have to know yourself, and where do you stand? Like, for me, being less controlling is always going to be better. So like, where do you stand? So like, the parent who's too permissive, you can go, oh, but then you gave the example of someone going, well, the kids are going to I'm going to mess up the kids anyway. In other words, just do whatever you want. So if you find yourself as a very kind of like, whatever, inconsiderate, or you're not that attentive to the parent, like, it's self-awareness. So if you're self-aware, like, be honest about yourself. Oh, I'm actually just lazy. That's why I don't follow these things. Not because I'm like super chilled out dude, which I realized about myself is I'm often just lazy. That's why I don't agree with these philosophies. But, wherever you stand, you've got to see, am I the healthy version or the unhealthy version of this? So for Madhurika, avoiding conflict is that sometimes for her, it's been good to come a little bit forward to actually assert herself a bit more. So it's not like a general thing, it's a personal thing. So the answer is always personally, where do you stand? you have a tendency, an unhealthy tendency towards X, will then move away. And if, to come to a center more. So I think self-awareness, because each topic can be too general. So you got to look specifically, who are you, and have an honest appraisal about where you stand. And then you'll know, oh, this is me just doing my thing and excusing it as whatever. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I gotcha. Okay. Hey?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I just like, absorbing it.
Sure.
One thing though, I don't know if this is like a complete like tall order. Okay, wait, let me first say this. Like our audience tends to be on the younger side, as far as I understand, as far as I'm aware. So I'd like to bring in this question now, and then I would really totally love to have another episode in a while, just talking about like parenting techniques, very hands-on, dealing with the challenges of the modern world, etc. But for now, I want to kind of bring this, and I hope it's not a tall order. Would it be possible to articulate basically like, how do you know that you're ready to be a fairly decent parent? like what do you need, what needs to be in place to know that you have like a good, that you're like decently prepared like on an entry level to be a decent parent?
I think that's a hard one, because in a sense you're never prepared, and it just happens, and it's so life-changing. And because you can't know what it's going to be like. You can't kind of, okay, well, I'm going to do this and that and get all my ducks in a row and then I'm going to be ready. It just doesn't work. But I do think that having a stable relationship without major cracks and issues already in the relationship is a key thing. And then I don't know, sometimes the unlikeliest people, they become parents and then they just do amazing at it. And so you don't know, some people just really grow into it. But I do think that having a level of maturity to be able to take up the responsibility to go, okay, whatever happens, however I got here, this is it now, and this is a huge responsibility, and I'm willing to make the sacrifices that are required, is a big deal. Because I think I've seen people struggle who've maybe gotten into parenthood but still felt that there were so many other things that they would rather be doing. I would rather do this or still be doing that. And the parenting kind of becomes something that's a little in the way. And then it's not possible, because you have to give it, 100%.
I guess that really speaks to, what I earlier called like a sense of fulfillment, like feeling like you're well situated in your life, and that to a large extent you've kind of figured out who you are and what your nature is and what you're supposed to do, so that you feel relatively, so that you have like a foundation of feeling pretty satisfied in your life, so that it's like, so that you're ready to give. Whereas if you're still trying to like figure yourself out.
Right. I agree with that. I think that, that baseline satisfaction and contentment, so that you're able to sacrifice, is an important thing. But then there's also an important shift. I mean, right at the beginning, Jai, you mentioned the thing about duty and about we grow into loving. And a large part of the way that we grow into loving is through service. I mean, it's actually in our philosophy. It's not that I love you first and therefore I will serve you. It's that actually through sacrificing and through serving, the love grows. So there has to be this willingness to put aside that I want to be satisfied, I want to be content, I want my life to feel like this and to look like this, and my satisfaction. That there needs to be that willingness to put aside that kind of selfishness, which we all grow up with, because we grow up thinking about my life. But once we become parents, to be able to put that aside and get focused on serving. So that's kind of the key requirement, that willingness to serve.
Yeah, I agree that like, how do you know when you're ready to have kids? It's when you realize that I'm going to be able to sacrifice to make my marriage work. I'm prepared to put in the hard yards to make the marriage work, because getting a divorce when you don't have kids, you can pretty much go about your life. But getting a divorce when you do have kids is a pretty destructive thing on most often. So you have to decide, am I prepared? If I'm going to go into starting a family, if I'm going to with this person, am I prepared to undergo and to participate in the work that it takes to make? Am I, not him, am I prepared to undergo the difficulties and the work it's going to take to try and make this work when the inevitable difficulties do come? Because I think that's the fundamental thing. I mean, of course, people have their karma, and you can have it all worked out or not worked out, and it can just play out. But because I think sometimes people just don't realize that you have to do the work. It's not your partner, it's not the kids, and if you're prepared, I'm prepared to do the work, and he still leaves, that's on him. But are you prepared to do the work to make this work? Then I think if you also don't know what the work is yet, because you only know when it comes. If there's at least a mood in you, once I make that decision and the kids come and it's difficult, you realize, oh, I want to make, I in my side, I wanted to make this work. So I'm going to try and make it work here. And that's, if you can honestly like say that to yourself and then you do it, then you've got a chance of it working. All you can do is yourself. You're going to be the change you want to see in the world. So all you can, if there are other entities involved, kids coming and husbands, you don't know how those will all play out. But you can look at yourself and go, well, am I prepared to try and make an effort to make this work? If you are, I mean, I think if you're married, I think the kids, it's all part of the process, so it's going to happen, but be aware that you have a role to play, and it's not always going to be easy, but it's ultimately the best situation to lead to your happiness is a stable marriage often.
One other thing is that you really grow into it. It's not something you prepare for, then you're ready, then you do it. You're not ready, it happens, your whole life gets shattered, and then gradually it starts to reform a new life. And as they grow, it's very dynamic. Kids are growing all the time. Their needs are changing all the time. So, at one point it's all about the sleeping and the feeding and whatever. At another point, it's about sitting in the park while they play in the sand pit, At another point, it's like, wow, my kid wants to go to this party at, with some buddies from the high school, and I don't really know, and whatever. So there's constantly things coming up. And as part of being involved in this family unit where everyone's trying to work together so that everyone's needs get met, and everyone's, is growing well and safe and whatever, you're constantly just having to grow and evolve with it. So in a sense, it's kind of one of those things, you dive in and then you start swimming.
Yeah, I was getting the analogy that I hear from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. This is in relationship to surrendering to a guru, but if you want to learn how to swim, the only way to learn is to get in the water. There's no other way of learning it. I'm really appreciating this a lot. Like, when I came to Alachua a few weeks ago, and I stayed with Abai for the first week. He has 5 kids, and they all like me. The Ganesh, I'm the youngest one. He could be a little mean sometimes, but I think he likes me too. And just that week with them, first of all, it was super wonderful for me. Just being around just like lovely kids, being around Ashley, like, man, just like superhero. Like, and my appreciation for Abai and Ashley was just like, man, you guys are like legit superhuman. Like, to have to do this, and I'm feeling the same way as I'm hearing you all speak, just like a lot of appreciation. I'm in New York City, which is like the city of activism. I'm very much over it, very much like exhausted seeing activism for this and activism for that. And I kind of came to the conclusion that the highest activism is like to raise good kids. Like, the society wouldn't be like a huge issue if we were like better people, or if we were like trained in a better way. And so just hearing how you guys were speaking, and I'm just sharing an appreciation right now that, yeah, this for me, y'all are like the highest activists, my Koti down the butts. And I haven't met your kids, of course, but with such considerate parentage as yourself, I'm sure they're lovely. And just really appreciating what you're bringing to the table today.
I 100% echo what Jai is saying, and yeah, we have some very grateful listeners as well. Rohini Stalker is saying, very grateful for this episode, as I am for your podcast in general. I learned so much from all of you and take courage that there is a future for our movement. So thank you so much. I think that this is kind of like a natural, organic conclusion point for today. It was absolutely wonderful being with you again. As I said in the beginning, Mukunda and Madhurika are very, very dear to my heart, and we're just such a shelter in my very early years of Krishna consciousness. So yeah, we'd love to have you back for another episode. Dive into more like technical, detailed aspects of the whole parenting journey. And yeah, I just, my heart is full. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to add one thing. It was interesting when we had the kids, and then we realized, oh my gosh, we need to figure out how to do this, right? Because we didn't grow up in devotee families, so it's not like, oh, we'll just do what our parents did, or we'll just do the opposite of what our parents did. We didn't know. So whenever we met like second generation devotees who seemed to just be like well situated, we would kind of like interview them. So what did your parents do? How did you feel about this? What worked? What didn't work? We were like, we really wanted to get a clear strategy down. How are we going to do it? Because we want, the best for our kids materially and spiritually. But then we realized there's no formula. There's the kind of a general formula, but with people, there isn't really a formula. It's all about figuring out, who am I dealing with? Who is this person? How do we interact, and what's the best, for us? So a lot of what we've done subsequently in terms of parenting has been trying to find out, figure out what's going to work. What do our kids need? How are we going to, provide that?
I'm almost on the verge of laughing, because one of the most common phrases I heard growing up was that, raising y'all didn't come with a manual. I regularly heard that from my mom, and it was usually after I got a whooping. it was like a half apology, but like you knew that you deserved to be whooped also. But she was like, raising y'all didn't come with a manual. And I used to just imprint in my mind so intensely. And I would be like, well, why not? Why doesn't it, like, hasn't there been like centuries of people doing parenting? Like, where is the manual?
Yeah, why is there no like lineage? Why is there no parampara of like parenting,
But
anyway,
rightfully saying, because we're all individuals and there's that dynamic. It's like a polarity engine. So there are like certain principles, but then you're dealing with an actual person. So it keeps like kind of playing off of each other.
But also, unfortunately, and it's such a hard pill to swallow, we're living in the material world, and it's a lower middle planet. It's like it's not even there's a lot of suffering, and that's just hard for us all to deal with. And you got to go, well, where's the solution to end the suffering?
Yes, facts.
You can do marriage, you can do kids, you can do job, you can do your health, you can do all of these things, which we're all trying to do because we're intelligent people. But ultimately, you kind of, the fundamental of our existence being embodied in the material world has some real problems. So where do we go legitimately to those solutions? Because they actually have a trickle-down effect on everything else too. I've seen in my relationship with my wife, with the kids, with myself, with my other people, how do we solve the problem of suffering is a crucial question. It just so happens that in a marriage, you can get a lot of that dose of suffering.
A lot of
right.
If there's one person in your life that's going to cause you a lot of suffering, it's going to be your spouse karmically. And then you add the kids in there. So it's yeah.
And then come up to the other kid. You're doing your best. You're trying hard. You're having a bad day. And your kid comes up and you're like, Dad, I hate you. And you're just like, man.
Yeah. So how do we
Wow.
solve the problem of suffering?
Beautiful. Mukunda, again, thank you so much. You're always bringing it back to that core fundamental question that's at pinching all existence at every moment and reminding us that, yeah, we need a solution to that ultimately.
Yeah.
It's just good to be reminded of that, because we can get so preoccupied with the details of our embodied existence that we forget that embodied existence
It's
is
a-
the
yeah.
rub point. That's the problem. It's there.
Exactly. Yeah. And if those other things that we're doing are working, great. But my practical experience is that the spiritual has helped me the most. I've tangibly felt that in a very practical way, not even in some theoretical way. I mean, if some other thing's going to work, great, I'll do that too. Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow.
I really appreciate that reminder. We need to hear these things again and again. Danadar Maharaj it speaks about he speaks about the habit of faith. You know, that like you need to be kind of need to be drilled. You know, you need
Because you
to
can do
read.
everything properly and it can still not work, unfortunately. And then you got to realize, oh, there's like almost a self-destruct button in our existence. So how do I actually get success? We all want that. How do I get the happiness? Anyway, I appreciate these talks because what it does is, with you and with all the other podcasts, this decentralization of the knowledge is actually helping people talk from a personal perspective. And there's some vigyan, some realization in there that when you guys have these things, it's so nice to hear people and you go, oh, this is and it rings true and people are realizing, otherwise it's often just theory. And so the living of it is really helpful. So thank you so much for putting this on. It's always, we always listen. It's really appreciative.
Thank you for the encouragement.
Jai. Thank you. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. You can catch your eyes on all podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, YouTube, and bear with us. We're well on our way. We have 8 more episodes to episode 52, and we've got some great things lined up. So keep your ear on the pulse. And that's about that for today. Hare Krishna.